I think there's something really special about photography and poetry in the way that they are formally constructed. And I think they lend themselves to sort of this ability to converse with one another in a way that's very open without too much sort of mediation and like too much specific sort of narrative. What I like about what I was first drawn to, I think, with this project and the idea to kind of connect poetry and photography was that there's the potential for a lot to happen in the negative space, in the space outside of photograph, or maybe in the spaces between poems or between lines.
Gareth's work, because of where he was photographing the area, the communities, and the people, I was very familiar with them in different ways. I didn't know them personally, but I know, the landscape that they sort of lived on and a little bit of the history of the area. And so the photographs that Gareth did, and I was able to view them at different points. There were places that I knew. I've seen them before. I've lived there as a child, spent time there. My family is very familiar with those areas too. So even though his photographs captured certain spaces, I had this other experience from my own, life that I brought in when I decided to write some of the poems for this project. So not only did, Gareth's images influence me in certain ways, or I could respond to them, but I brought my own sort of interpretation of the area and the experience that I had with the area. And I think it, in the end, the first, set of work that we did, I think worked out very well for that. Not so much that the two art forms were speaking to each other. I think at different points they sort of connect and move away again, which is fine, for it to do that. So I appreciate it, being able to do that, not to be rigid. Gareth didn't tell me what to do. He shared the images and didn't say anything, and like I said, the images and the places were very, very familiar, so it was easy for me to think about what I could write, and ended up writing.
Yeah, I also feel like when we're thinking conceptually about the project and about like what we're going to show to the audience, we're kind of in this context in which documentary photography, which is kind of one of the starting points of the project, is usually paired with journalistic discourse, so like this type of texts that are found in the media and this type of writing that is found on the media, and this type of writing paired with this documentary photography. In a way, we're understanding misrepresents the border and misrepresents like the type of the life that people live in this border or people crossing the border. So I think that the combination of poetry and photography will bring like a new way of relating language with image making, and the possibility of these two to kind of shape a new narrative around the border, which is different generally when we look at documentary photography or just journalistic writing.
And I think a lot of, the real gem or germination of this project was in 2018, now nearly 5 years ago, out of early conversations with Martín about his research and thinking about ways in which there are other ways for art to engage with social issues. And those conversations really opened I come from photojournalism, I come from that background. And I think those conversations with Martín early on opened up my mind to possibilities. And then in researching a project about the border, I encountered Ofelia's poetry. And I think that's also I was going, when I began to photograph, it wasn't just going the one way. I had already immersed myself in all your writing, that you've written before this project. Mm-hmm. So there was an existing material to work from and with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we earlier in the other interview, we were talking about the poetry and sort of how it fit with this project initially when we first met. And of course, my own work, being O'odham and being from this region, and then again, of course, being from the O'odham that were from the traditional homes on the Sonora side, and making those crossings every now and then, was different and so forth. But anyway, I had a familiarity with, of course, the land and the way that you live in a desert environment was something that I just knew and lived because my parents did and all the people before them. And so for me to write, when I first started writing, that was I think for me, an important area to think about and start writing about. And so many of my pieces are about, the Southwest and the desert and so forth, but sort of from an O'odham perspective. So the landscape, that Gareth was, I think, thinking about for this project, even though it was the border region, nonetheless, it was this desert landscape, which, I knew and lived in and had written about. And so it seemed to all, come together even, as we first met and started talking about our this project.
And I think also just to note that then as we began sharing some of the work, we started meeting other artists who were also already doing photography, poetry, and combining these mediums in these ways to explore these similar issues.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, this has been slowly occurring, and I notice and pay attention to it, whether it's for O'odham or one of the other languages in the state of Arizona, where we have requests to have, certain museum content translated, into these various languages. So that's been occurring more so in the recent past. But also I know that those of us that choose to take up those, small projects, have always been sort of wary, because it's still, some people treat these languages as just tokens, we're going to put it up, and that's about it, when there's so much more behind it. And I think over time, museums have become more sensitive and better educated about the role of multilingualism in exhibition preparation, especially for text, and especially here in the Southwest, where our, these museums sit to, represent the languages. And I know, having been here at this campus for so many years, I know that if another language is going to be represented, it'll be English and Spanish, and very rarely a native language of Arizona. But that's been changing slowly. So I'm excited, and because this exhibit has a lot of O'odham language in it. So I'm used to, thinking about this project and the way we talk about this project. And I can, read it or write about it in English and also in O'odham, just because we've been working it for so long. So it's comfortable, and it's on one level sort of easy to do, because I value what we're saying and what we want to say with this exhibit and with the text that we're using, and so I appreciate having. To see the words represented in O'odham, and of course here in the Southwest, Spanish is always there. So yeah, so I think it's all very positive.
Well, I guess that's something that Ofelia just mentioned now is so that this exhibition or these collaborations don't become like a superficial attempt or like a token for inclusion or for diversifying content or collaborations. But I think one of the key things that we see in scholarship, but also in like practice, is that there has to be like a long-term engagement with these conversations and with these collaborations, and that this is what is going to bring the depth and the potential for institutional change. And that is not only engaging like in one exhibition or translating like the title of the exhibit or the text of the exhibit, but really, working long term with the communities you want to see inside the museum, and not only working with them, but also somehow it's nice that museums also employ the people that they want to see inside the museum too, and that is not also only consider them as audience, but also like give them the possibility of participating in decision making, in curation, in production, or in the different like activities of the museum. So I think long-term engagement is one of the main things.
I also think that there's something we've definitely encountered. With this project, we created the initial body of work and then tried to exhibit that work in local communities where the work was made first. And then slowly the project grew and we met more artists and we had open calls, and slowly we were able to show the work in other spaces as well. But one thing that we've really tried to always do is to also encourage these institutions that we've partnered with to put work into bringing community members to the exhibitions, and I think there could just be more of that. And it is a logistical challenge, and it's not really something that's usually within the purview of a museum. But I think that as museums engage with this question more, they will begin to learn that maybe there are ways in which they can facilitate more community interaction through things as simple as arranging programming and actually taking care of transport, or like providing meals and reaching out and working through existing community networks. And that's always something we've been excited to do with our partners.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And also too, I think sort of related to that, not only having exhibits or making the space of museums more welcoming, because it can be intimidating places. Creating that kind of environment so people, say Native people will want to come to view, the programming there. But also, most tribes, say for instance in the state of Arizona, if not across the U.S., the tribes have their own museums, and so they create, curate, exhibits, sort of very regionally specialized to the community sometimes, but they're very open to traveling exhibits, and a lot of times large museums are not aware that you can, work with these tribal museums to bring, different types of exhibits to them. I mean, they have their own kind of challenges because they're often much smaller spaces, but you can pare down a large exhibit for a tribal museum. And I know tribal museums always appreciate working with larger institutions to bring shows out to their community. And I was reminded when Gareth was talking about bringing and inviting people to exhibits, where we did that with our first Tucson exhibit, which was at the Tucson Museum of Art, where we literally brought people from Sonora, Mexico, to come to see the exhibit, because the photographs, many of Gareth's photographs, were taken in their communities or were of people in those communities. And so even though they had seen the images, but it's different when you see them exhibited in the show with all the other parts of the show. And so it was I think it was a wonderful experience for the adults that came, and then also for the young people and the children that came to make the trip to the city of Tucson and to go to a large museum. And but it is challenging to make that happen. But we were able to do that one for that one event.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
I'm also reminded of. Do you remember when we first showed the work in Quitovac?
Mm-hmm.
We came and recorded the poem
Mm-hmm.
with you, and then we had a little laptop set up, and people could listen to Ofelia read the poems. And for a lot of the members in that community, the kids especially, I think, were so excited to hear O'odham, because it's not really spoken that much anymore. So I think that was just a very small indication of the huge amount of interest I think that people have for multilingual experiences. I was wondering if maybe you could share a little bit about the process of translation.
Yeah, because this is something that came up a lot. And so we presented Ofelia's poetry, and part of the poetry is written in English, and some part is written in O'odham. And when we went to Mexico, we had to translate the majority of the poem into Spanish. And we had also Ofelia reading the poetry in audio and in O'odham and English, but we also wanted to have the poetry read in Spanish for people who are still maybe not able to read, like kids or people who just wanted to hear also the poetry. And for me, it was a wonderful experience. I have some experience translating, but in this case, working from the beginning of the project, seeing Gareth images and seeing Ofelia's poetries being kind of written in conversation with these images was, it was a way of bridging communities, I guess, bridging whatever we were doing in New York in this first meeting that we had in Magnum Foundation, and whatever meetings we had also in Tucson, and trying to see, how this work will resonate with the communities in Quitovac or in Sonoyta or in the Mexican side. And it was a great experience, and it was funny because Gareth had these images that were taken in this community in Quitovac, and somehow there was this image of a little girl playing, and Ofelia wrote a poem about this little girl and about these kids that were playing. And when I was translating that poem, I didn't realize, but when we went to the communities, the kids were there listening and reading that poem that was written on their, inspired by them, no? So it's it comes full circle, no? So I think translation there and multilingualism also there kind of helps to bring back to where Gareth was inspired and where Ofelia was inspired, to them to see how do we see us as artists, as writers, as photographers, their life, their quotidianity, and it was a really nice experience.